begin with Trey Yingst, who is live in Tel Aviv as Sirens just went off moments ago. Hi, Trey.
Yeah, Todd, Carly, good morning. Right now in the distance, we can hear a number of small explosions, an indication that the Iranians launched yet another missile with a cluster munition on top, raining those bomblets down on the population below. This was the second attack in just 2 minutes that took place, one targeting the northern city of Haifa and the other central Israel. As Operation Epic Fury grinds on, there is now talk of diplomacy across the Middle East. We understand that Egypt, Pakistan, and Turkey are reportedly taking the lead in mediating as Gulf countries continue to come under Iranian attack. Tuesday, President Trump said Iran had given him a present worth a tremendous amount of money. He didn't elaborate on what the gift was, but said it's a sign they're dealing with the right people. As for the framework of the current negotiations, here's what President Trump had to say.
It all starts with they cannot have a nuclear weapon. Just, I said yesterday, they said, what are the top 10? I said, well, number 1, 2, and 3 is they can't have a nuclear weapon. And they're not going to have a nuclear weapon. And we're talking about that. And I don't want to say in advance, but they've agreed they will never have a nuclear weapon. They've agreed to that.
Iranian officials are reportedly worried that the United States is buying time before more intense operations. But the president has indicated Vice President J.D. Vance would participate in the talks aimed at ending the war. U.S. and Israeli strikes have continued over the past 24 hours, putting new pressure on the Iranian regime. And overnight, Iran launched more barrages of ballistic missiles toward Israel. One of the cluster munitions landed in a religious community just outside of Tel Aviv, wounding at least 9 people.
The Iranians plan to launch hundreds of missiles towards Israel on the first day of the operation. They fired fewer than 100 on the first day and half that amount on the second day. We disrupted these intentions and continue to disrupt them. The number of launches decreased very quickly. The average is roughly about 10 missiles per day. The regime tries to concentrate its efforts every few days and launch more broadly, mainly towards population centers.
Now, Todd, Carly, we understand there are a number of impacts from that last Iranian attack against Israel. First responders are now rushing to the scenes to determine if anyone was injured. Guys?
Yeah, the war clearly continues as the potential for talks is being raised for the first time. Trey, live for us in Tel Aviv. Trey Yingst, we thank you so much. Let's bring in former Army Black Hawk helicopter pilot, battalion commander, and international military strategist, Lieutenant Colonel Darren Gobb. Sir, thank you so much for joining us. Do you believe that Iran has been weakened enough by this military campaign that we have reached maximum leverage so that we can enter into these talks?
Yeah, good morning, Carly. I think they've been significantly weakened into the point where they could want to enter these talks out of self-preservation because they know based on our current actions and, of course, how Israel has operated since October 7th massacre, then that we're going to continue with negotiations. We're going to continue to talk to them the best we can. However, what we're not going to do is cease operations or go into ceasefires in order to allow them to rebuild or take a break. I certainly hope that they take this opportunity to reach a meaningful deal potentially that could end the hostilities. But Iran is typically not a very trustworthy player in this arena. So we'll see how it plays out, but they have lost a significant amount of military capability and leverage themselves while we just continue to build our own.
Yeah, so to that point, on the one hand, we're talking about diplomacy, but on the other, the Pentagon has deployed between 2,000 and 3,000 soldiers from the 82nd Airborne that are expected to arrive in the region on Friday, which coincides with President Trump's deadline for Iran to reopen the Strait of Hormuz. If that doesn't happen, if the strait does not open on Friday, what would their mission be?
Difficult to tell with the formation of that size. It's not as many people as a lot of folks would think when it comes to a military formation that can hold a lot of ground. With them, I can see something along the lines of a use for them on controlling some area on Karg Island, or some of the smaller islands in the Strait of Hormuz that are strategically located to allow ships to flow through there, but prevent land use for things like drones, smaller missiles, or other things that might interdict oil shipping and ships that try to go through there and increase their risk. So I don't see them doing something rather large. It's not that many people, but the 82nd is extraordinarily capable and flexible with doing a number of missions.
Yeah, would one of those missions be boots on the ground?
I certainly hope not, but commanders like to have options, and they don't want to take something off the table if they don't have to. So having them in the area could mean they're just looking for another point of leverage to be able to say, hey, we're ready to move if we have to. But if necessary, I think their mission will be very limited in scope and in time.
Yeah, that's a great point. And we saw the troop buildup in the lead up to the strikes beginning, and this could be along the similar vein of that, and adding more troops and saying this is what we could do. Now let's come to the negotiating table. The president also said yesterday that Iran gave the U.S. a present worth a tremendous amount of money having to do with oil in the Strait of Hormuz. Do you have any thoughts on what he could have been referring to?
Yeah, that's a difficult one, and I'm sure it's why he's holding it close. But it could be as simple as that we're opening it back up to I guess what they describe as hostile nations again, be able to move their oil through there. But it could just be something that none of us are anticipating, that they're trying to use to regain some of their own leverage against us in these negotiations also, and put something on the table right away. So it's hard to tell right now what exactly that could be. There's a number of.
It was quite the soundbite, a tremendous amount of money and a present that was sent on Monday and arrived on Tuesday. Finally, I think another question that needs to be asked is what the ultimate goal would be. If we do enter in these diplomatic talks, would the most positive outcome be for the Iranian people to still rise up for total regime control? Or are we working with a group of people now where not just in the immediate days, but for years to come, the United States could work with?
I think both of those are possibilities, and I think in the best case outcomes, I don't want to be naive and think that the Iranian people rising up against their own dictators would be bloodless or less ugly than other things. It wouldn't be pleasant, but it could be necessary and the only way forward to actually solve this problem. I could see someone coming out of the ranks of something like the IRGC or a government that has been there quietly, biding their time and waiting for the day to come forward when they could actually be that person who can make the difference and just be a good neighbor. Doesn't have to be a democracy, just stop being a hostile nation to everybody, frankly, around the world.
A Middle East that could forever be changed as mediators from Turkey, Egypt, and Pakistan are pushing for meetings to be arranged between the United States and Iran within the next 48 hours. We will certainly be watching. Lieutenant Colonel Darren Gobb, we thank you so much for your time.
I'm Steve Ducey. I'm Brian Kilmeade.
And I'm Ainsley Earhart. And click here to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page to catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis.